You go to Kerala, for example, it is exactly reverse. So you will end up with 1 or 2 lactations, and invariably you have to sell the animal to meat purpose. That is not possible in India, and that is one of the reasons why Indian dairy is not profitable. We are losing about 50% of our money from the body weight. Okay, so this is a forage-to-concentrate issue.
Now I would like to invite our next speaker, who is an animal nutritionist with a lot of experience, and he has worked in different fields. दोनों सेक्टर का उनको तजुर्बा है. He is also involved in some of the activities in animal nutrition industry. I would like to invite Dr. Channegowda. I would like to have a round of applause for the speakers.
Good afternoon, everybody. Namaste. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity, share my experience in the area of dairy nutrition. In the next 15-20 minutes, I will be discussing more about rumen dynamics and its pH effects on fat and SNF mainly. It is said that it is milk quality, but I will be emphasizing more on milk fat and then the solids not fat. To be a dairy farmer or a dairy cooperative, to be sustainable in the dairy production, so we will be focusing more on fat and SNF. Why the fat and SNF are important to any dairy farmer or to any milk cooperative or to any milk processing company. We all know milk pricing is done based on fat and SNF in India. And long back, NDDB has set its standards. Minimum standards are 3.5% of fat should be there, and about 8.5%, I'm sorry, it's 8.5% of SNF. Otherwise, they can reject the milk in any milk collection center. That is the minimum standard. Sometime back, by the Food Safety Authorities in India, in the year 2019, they have done a huge survey on milk samples. Over 6,000 milk samples are collected all over India, both from the cooperatives, organized sector and unorganized sector, both buffalo milk and cow's milk. And they found more than 1/3 of the samples were not able to meet minimum fat and SNF. So this was the finding. From then onwards, government took it very seriously and then focusing more on the minimum parameters. Whereas the other parameters like aflatoxins or the antibiotic residues and other things, they come in the food safety. Whereas the minimum standards, they need to pour their milk into the any milk cooperative is this 3.5 and then 8.5 SNF. So the pricing of milk in India largely regulated by the government, and whereas the private milk organizations, they try to set up their procurement prices in and around the government guidelines, like plus or minus 1 rupee. So this is the background. And if you look at the animal level, at the farm level, how this milk fat and SNF, they are highly variable parameters. Within an individual, they vary, the fat content vary from morning to evening milk. And within the same lactation, they vary between early lactation, mid lactation and late lactation. And between the breeds, Holstein and the Jersey and the buffalo, between the species, also highly variable. This is one thing. Genetically, if you look at the genetics of the animal, the milk fat content and the milk production are inversely related. If one goes up, you try to produce more milk by feeding more, the fat will drop down. Or if you try feeding more forages and roughages, like somebody was starting in the morning, low quality straw, low energy diets, the fat will little bit go up, whereas the milk production goes down. So they are inversely related. This is basic genetics. And then if you look at the feeding aspects, the dry matter requirement by the animal and the dry matter intake, voluntary intake, those are the two key drivers of the milk fat synthesis. The base for any dairy farm or any dairy farmer in feeding is the forage and concentrate ratio. Most of the nutritionists in other countries, they focus, this is the first parameter they focus. You always try to focus forage and then concentrate and their ratio. If you alter, I think in India, in the feeding system, much has been altered. Look at from Kerala feeding system, go to Punjab feeding system, entirely different. It is exactly reverse. It's coming up in the next slide. So you have to focus more on forage and concentrate ratio to get minimum fat and the SNF. So I have the lactation this thing here. The first 100 days is the early lactation, high milking period, and the second 100 days is the mid lactation, medium milking period, and then the late lactation, third 100 days, and about 60 days is the dry period. I just focus on the early lactation where the fat issue is more, because animal is produced. If you look at the blue color curve, the milk production is more in the first 2 months. Animal reaches the peak. But look at the dry matter intake. Because of the delivery stress and the negative energy balance, all that, animal will not be eating enough to meet the requirements. So the dry matter intake is less. And animal is losing its body weight also because all the body fat is mobilizing and then putting it to the milk. So milk production is increasing. So you have the main challenge of meeting fat percentage in the early lactation period. When you go to the second trimester, milk production stabilizes, animals start eating more after 8 weeks, so it can balance that one. Okay. So coming to the animal physiology, rumen is the major digestive organ in ruminants. Roughly it holds about 150 liters of capacity, having 10 to 20% dry matter, more of watery. If you look from the top to the rumen, on the top you have the gas filled up, that is a volatile fatty acids and other gases. And the next layer is the watery portion, that's called rumen liquor. And then the third layer is the large particles which are more than 1 inch in length in the chopping. And in the bottom layer is partially digested and small particles. This organ contracts 1 to 2 times in a minute. So it comes continuously contracting, 1 to 2 contractions in a minute. So during the contraction, the larger particles come to the top, and in the movement it is going to touch the inlet of the esophagus. You can see the picture, that's called inner this one. So it is going to touch the opening. So it causes an irritation. It's a kind of scratch effect. That's how the rumination starts. Now this is very, very, very important physiologically. How long your animal ruminates, how much it ruminates, how much saliva it produces, depending on that, all your milk parameter decides. So if you look at the ruminal contents, microbiology, we have rumen bacteria in billions, whereas protozoa in millions, and the fungi in thousands. The rumen on its own, with a natural system of feeding, it can produce up to 2.5 kg of microbial protein in a day, and that is just enough to meet the requirement of 10 kg of milk production daily. So this is a natural situation. So all our aim should be focusing on producing more saliva by rumination more. Reason why, saliva contains a lot of bicarbonate ions. So that is going to buffer the rumen, and that is going to maintain the rumen pH. The normal pH being 5.8 to 6.2, but in our dairy system, many bigger dairies have gone below 5.5. So none of them have reached, trying to, able to reach the pH of 6. So I told you earlier already, rumen pH largely depends upon throughout its life cycle, forage and concentrate ratio, against us upon it. If you look at the research findings here, if a cow, normally a dairy cow produces about 80 to 100 liters of saliva per day, per head. If you feed completely on the forage diet, the animal can produce up to 150 liters of saliva. That's what the research says. And if you feed the same animal with only concentrates, it can only produce 40 liters of saliva. Look at the difference. So when the saliva reduces, the acidity increases. So rumen buffering reduces. So that is where it affects the milk fat synthesis. Okay. So what we all should focus in an animal environment or in the farm management to produce more saliva with our existing feeding systems. So the number one is a cow should be sitting or lying down and gut chewing or ruminating for minimum of 12 to 14 hours a day. This is basic. So we have to provide an infrastructure where animal can sit down for long time. One of the major thing we find is the place where animal sits or the place where the animals are holding is either the stone slabs or the concrete floors. So most of our practices early morning, everybody washes their concrete floors. The wet floor, the Holstein cow prefers a dry place to sit down. It doesn't like to sit on the wet floor. If you look at a dairy farm from a distance, most of the animals will be standing. That itself indicates animals are not able to sit down. And the animal doesn't prefer hard floor. It prefers a soft bed-like floor to sit down. So sandy beds are better. Preferably 12 inches depth sand is much better. And the third one it requires is a shade. Animals prefer natural shade, no problem, even if it is artificial shade built up to 25 feet height in the center gives better shade. So these are three things the animal require. So there is a difference in the animal rumination system. If an animal standing and ruminating, it is able to regurgitate a small bolus like a cricket ball size, and it will chew only for a brief time. It won't chew for a long time, like 2-3 minutes, and then swallow it. It produces less saliva. So when saliva is less, buffering is less, fat synthesis goes down. Same animal, if you make it sit down for a long time comfortably, it is able to regurgitate a bigger ball of cut and chew it for a very long time and produce lot of saliva and buffers, and that's how rumen pH is maintained, and that's how milk fat attitude. So it is said that commonly quiet cows eat more dry matter, sit relaxedly in a comfortable place for a long time and chew more, produce more saliva. So see, your animals are sitting down for a long time. Okay? So if you look at the ruminant diet, more than 70% is carbohydrates. That includes fiber portion mainly. The fiber that is fermentable in the rumen is called effective fiber. Remaining is protein, fat, and a little bit of ash and other things. So in the carbohydrate, the fiber portion, there are two structural carbohydrates and non-structural carbohydrates. The structural carbohydrates include cellulose and hemicellulose. The fermentation of cellulose and hemicellulose is slow, and maximum animal can digest up to 50% only, but produces acetic acid and butyric acid. They are the precursor for milk fat. So that is very important. On the other hand, if you feed more concentrates, the non-structural carbohydrates, sugars and starch is more, and they are easily digestible up to 100%. They produce more propionic acid. The propionic acid is the one which initiates the milk synthesis. Milk production is more, animal can produce more, but fat synthesis will be less. So you have to focus again, it comes back to the forage and concentrate ratio. So this is the brief animal physiology and why fat and SNF are important in maintaining milk quality, minimum parameters, to be able to sustainable in a dairy farm or a cooperative or a milk processing organization. I will come to what are the factors that affect the rumen pH and what are its effect. There are about 6 factors that I am going to explain. If you look at the pH scale, it runs between 0 to 14. The center point being 7, that is a neutral pH. Below 7 is the acidic pH, and above 7 is the alkaline pH. Now in the rumen, the pH ranges between 5.5 to 6.5 normally within a dairy. Our optimum being 5.8 to 6.2. Now if you feed more forage diet, the fiber digesting bacteria increases, and that gives a rumen pH at around 6 and above. Whereas if you feed more concentrate, the starch digesting bacteria will increase, and they produce more propionic acid. Some amount of it gets converted to lactic acid, and that brings down the milk pH, that is acidic pH. Okay, this is a basic. Number one factor, again come back to the forage and concentrate ratio. Now high forage diets always stimulate rumination. They try to ruminate more, they sit more, produce more saliva and buffers it. Concentrate diets, starch rapidly degraded, and excessive concentrates produce propionic acid and lactic acid and causes acidosis. That depresses the milk fat synthesis. This is a number one factor. Now if you look at the graph, I have the forage and concentrate ratio on the top and also the bottom. On the top, forage ratio ranging from 80 to 20, and the concentrate ratio in the reverse 20 to 60. If you go to northwestern part of India, we still have the forage concentrate ratio somewhere around 60-40. If you go to Kerala, it is exactly reverse. The 40-60, more of concentrates, less of forage. So if you feed more concentrates, more forage, up to 70-80% on dry matter basis, the acetic acid concentration is more. As the forage concentration decreases, the acetic acid decreases, whereas the propionic acid increases. So you produce more milk, but your fat synthesis will be less. So the best forage concentrate ratio for a dairy nutritionist is at least 70-30. The animal can give up to 8 to 10 lactations with good lactation rate, good fat and good consumption. That lifespan will be better, rumen health will be better. Whereas 60-40 is also good. That is what is practiced in some of the small dairy holdings, I can say, not in big dairy herds. Most of the commercial dairies are settled down with 50-50. That is what we are following, because forage is not available. Not many are catering forage in the dairy market. Whereas concentrate are delivered to the doorstep. There are many dealers, Nukan of the villages, everybody sells. Forage nobody sells. So that is a problem. You go to Kerala, for example, it is exactly reverse. So you will end up with 1 or 2 lactations, and invariably you have to sell the animal to meat purpose. That is not possible in India, and that is one of the reasons why Indian dairy is not profitable. We are losing about 50% of our money from the body weight. Okay, so this is the forage concentration ratio important. Coming to the physical form of the feed, the grains are the concentrate part. The grinding, steam flaking, and then pelleting, cooking, all these factors. Whereas in the forages, chopping to the smallest particle like quarter-inch, very small particle size, over mixing in TMR wagons, all these things, they expose the starch granules to the bacteria to feed fast and then produce more of propionic acid or lactic acid. The milk rumen pH drops down. That is where milk fat synthesis again comes down. So while processing the feed, the physical form is very important. What particle size? What is the length of the forage particle? It has to be minimum ½ inch. Between quarter to ½ inch they say. In the literature many, but ½ inch, I suggest ½ inch is better. At least 10% of the particle size should be 1 inch and above to stimulate rumination. A minimum of 2 to 5 kg, 1 inch particle should be there in every day's diet. So we should set up the chopping machine. Some amount should come in the 1 inch length and remaining at around ½ inch. Otherwise, it reduces the salivation, rumination, and then saliva production and pH. So if you look at a dairy farm from a distance, so if the rumination is proper or the infrastructure is good, then animals, you see most of the animals, more than 60% of the animals sitting and ruminating. That is a healthy sign of a dairy farm. Okay. The third factor is the amount of dry matter intake, the feed intake. Sometimes the higher dry matter intake, animal eats more than its requirement, quality requirement. So the fermentation in the rumen is extended for a prolonged length of time. So then there will be less time available for the rumination. Then also rumination reduces. So the rate of speed at which the saliva produces also reduces, and that affects the buffering. Again, rumen pH. Okay. And we have a habit of fresh cut every day in the small and medium holdings. Cut fresh fodder and feed it daily. Normally, fresh fodder has about moisture about 80 to 85%. So about 15% is the dry matter. So if you feed more of fresh fodder, the animal feels the wetting of the food is not required, already wet. So it produces less saliva. So there also it affects the saliva production. That is a factor. Coming to the feeding of fats and oils in the dairy diets, normally we maintain between 4 to 5% of the fat in the feed formulations. You cannot feed more than 6%, although some experts feel in many developed countries up to 8%, but no good. If you feed more than 5% of the fat gets coated on the plant fibers. So the fiber gets coated with the oily content. The rumen bacteria don't like to eat on that. It fails to attach to the fiber particles. So the fermentation will be denied. So that is why the feeding more than 4 to 5% of the fat is no good for ruminants. Reason why, there is less amount of digestion of fat takes place in the rumen. More takes place in the intestine, upper basin and other parts, not in the rumen. So to minimize this, there are alternatives. One of them is of course rumen protected fat. This bypass fat is already into picture. But one of the drawback with the bypass fat is the palatability. If you just feed more than 10 kg in a ton, the palatability is no good. Some preparations are good up to 20 kg, but not all preparations. The other alternative is to feed whole oil seeds like soya seeds, mustard seeds, and then cotton seeds. We used to feed cotton seeds earlier when we were kids. So these crushed seeds can be used up to 400 to 500 gram per day to maintain the fat levels. It will not affect the rumen fermentation. Okay. Then the method of feeding, much has been talked about TMR, total mixed ration, which has got both concentrates, forage and then supplements and all the additives. So animal, when it bites, when it takes a bite, each bite should have all the proportions of materials. So that is a principle of the TMR, so that the salivation is better, rumination is better, and sorting, segregation of the particles will be very less, acceptability is good. You can mask the smell or taste of some of the ingredients like bypass fat in TMR. So these are the ideas. Whereas in the small and medium holdings, if you feed concentrate separately, forage separately, a dairy farmer should not feed concentrate first in the morning in an empty stomach, in the fresh stomach. First feeding should be forage. Otherwise, best thing is to mix some quantity of forage, chopped forage, and then concentrate, mix it in a basin or a bucket and then feed it. That is the best thing, because you will have the minimum finely ground grains in it. If you feed concentrate separately, you should not feed more than 3.5 kilo per time. You can increase the number of meals per day 3-4 times, but at a time you should not feed more than 3.5 kg. So that affects the rumen fermentation. Okay. So this is in brief about this one. Coming to the conclusion, I have listed certain factors. Drinking water is very important. An adult cow can drink up to 150 liters of water daily. A normal cow drinks about 120 to 130 liters of water daily. So promote drinking water. Reason why? Milk contains 87 to 88% water only. And the animal body also nearly 65 to 70% is water only. So for all metabolic functions, the carrier is blood, which contains water only. So promote drinking more water. Drink more water, it produces little more milk. So what are the strategies? First of all, provide shade to the water tank, overhead tank. Because if the water tank is kept in the sunlight, it becomes warm, animal drinks less water. Even the drinking trough should also be constructed under the shelter. It should be under the shade, then animal drinks more water. In the small holdings, if you are offering water in the buckets or the basins, you frequently offer the water. Normally, 2 or 3 times in a day they offer the water. Rather, I would suggest offer drinking water in the bucket or basin 7 to 8 times a day, at least 5 to 6 times a day. That is one thing. The Holstein cow has got 29,000 taste buds compared to human beings 9,000, compared to poultry it's only 2,000 taste buds. So the taste buds are more in Holstein cow. They are highly sensitive for the smell and the aroma. So you should not use the same bucket or the basin to feed the water which is used for the feeding concentrates. So there should be a separate provision for drinking water, there should be a separate provision for eating food. If you mix, animal drinks less water. And when you offer water repeatedly, every time when you offer, some amount of leftover will be there. Throw out the leftover and fill up the fresh water, it drinks more. So these are the certain modifications at the small holdings you can make to promote drinking water so that animal can produce very well. Then provide shade, preferably natural shade, but that's not possible. Artificially also construct the houses at about 25 to 30 feet height in the center so that it gives a shade for the animal. And the place for animal to lie down should not be stone slabs or the concrete floor. Reason why? It doesn't prefer the hard surface, it doesn't prefer the wet surface. That is the reason why we all suggest at least rubber mat. It should be dry. If it is wet, animal will be standing, when it gets tired only it will sit down. So unless it sit down, it is not able to regurgitate a bigger bowl for rumination, produce less saliva, affecting the rumen weight. So see that your animal is sitting for at least 12 to 13 hours, 14 hours a day, because normally dairy cow ruminates more than 8 hours a day. That is a thing. Then maintain optimum forage concentrate ratio, okay, and try delivering all the nutrients required, protein, energy, fat, everything through forage only first. If you are not able to meet the requirement with forage, then compensate with a concentrate diet, not the reverse. So a dairy nutritionist should focus delivering all the nutrients from forage nutrition. Then only the rumination is better, milk fat synthesis is better. And try maintaining the forage particle size half an inch and at least 10% more than 1 inch. So these are the basics at the farm level. This apart, you have some supplements, of course, they are not the major one. You know, supplement forms about 2-3% of the diet. So imagine 97% is whatever I said now. So 2% is you have some yeast and enzymes and rumen buffer and protected amino acids like methionine, lysine, all that. So these things can be incorporated to monitor the rumen pH to that level. So I repeat, the forage concentrate is very, very important and the baseline to maintain the thing. Then the infrastructure, make the animal to lie down for more than 12 hours and ruminate more than 8 hours. Get bigger ball of rumination, extended bite of chewing, more saliva, good rumen pH. Then your fat and SNF issue will not be there. Thank you.